Now, more than 30 people have been killed in a stampede at the funeral of General Qasem Soleimani in Iran. And this comes as the global fallout from the military commander's killing continues to reverberate around the world. China has declared it will take relentless efforts in a bid to save the Iranian nuclear treaty. The Chinese embassy in Washington also issued a statement urging the Chinese diaspora to stay alert and take safety precautions. But what role can China play in opening a dialogue between Iran and the United States? And could regional instability impact China's energy imports? Well, joining me to talk about this are from Tel Aviv, Meir Javedanfar, a Middle East analyst, and here in the Beijing studio, Wang Suolao, Deputy Director of the Institute of Area Studies at Peking University. Welcome to you both. So before we start, a spokesperson for Beijing gave a presser at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Monday regarding China's position on the fallout from Soleimani's killing. I just want to read this to our viewers and get your response to it. The spokesperson says the international community should have the bigger, long-term picture in mind, firmly uphold the JCPOA, and work for amelioration in the Iranian nuclear issue and the situation in the Middle East. China will continue to remain in close communication and coordination with relevant parties and make tireless efforts to this end. They also said, we believe that despite its reduction in commitments due to external reasons, Iran has demonstrated a restrained attitude and its political will to implement the JCPOA effectively and in full, and has not violated its obligations under the NPT. So, Meir Javedanfar, let me start with you, sir. What's your reaction to China's response after hearing this? Do you agree?
Well, I agree. For China, the priorities are the JCPOA, and of course the oil supplies. Your economy is very dependent on oil. Iran is your fourth biggest oil supplier. But you know, it's very limited what China can do at the moment. This is a very, very emotional issue right now, what's going on in Iran. The Iranian-American, tensions have been going on. These are not issues that are outside, that are within China's control or any other country's control. The two sides have taken very controversial steps recently. We have to remember that on the one hand, the United States of America assassinated the second most powerful man in Iran, the most important military figure in that country. So that has understandably made the leadership of that country very, very angry. But at the same time, Mr. Qasem Soleimani had in the past been responsible for the death of 603 American soldiers between 2003 and 2011. He had planned many, many different operations which has caused the death of U.S. allies as well as U.S. soldiers, as we can see. So, you know, he was involved in fighting the U.S. He was part of the ongoing proxy war between Iran and the U.S. And I don't think any of these are within China's remit of influence. So I think we have to, the issue here is to focus on the JCPOA. Whether it will survive, I think, for now the prognosis is reasonable. In the future, we have to wait and see.
And Professor Wang, let me bring you into this. So the statement went on to say, amid the current tensions, there has been no official communication channel between Iran and the United States. Therefore, a third party is needed to play a part. Mr. Javedanfar just mentioned that there is very limited for China to do here. Do you agree with what's been said? Could China be the interlocutor here?
Well, partly I agree that it's true that China can play a limited role in this moment, but that doesn't mean China could not play a bigger role in the near future. Because when we look at several years ago, when China played a very big role in reaching the JCPOA, everybody, the six other parties, know that China really played a big role. But at the moment, it's true that it's hard for China to convince and to persuade the Iranian side to keep silent and to make any reaction to to American wrongdoing. So I think at the current moment, maybe China can play some role to at least to ease the escalation, the tensions.
And an article in South China Morning Post also argued that Beijing will be nervous about destabilization in this region, as this could hamper the expansion of the Belt and Road Initiative. Professor Wang, do you agree with these kind of concerns? I mean, how damaging could it be for Beijing's flagship international policy if there are continued hostilities in the region?
Yes, I agree that it's true that because Iran is a very important country in this area, and any conflict, any war happen in the Gulf regions that could have a have a big negative impact on China's One Belt One Road initiative. But at the same time, we know One Belt One Road initiative is not only to the Middle East, to Africa, to Central Asia, to many other areas. So in this regard, I don't think, generally speaking, I don't think, the conflict in the Gulf region could have a very big negative on the China One Belt One Road initiative.
Mr. Javedanfar, how are you looking at this? The interests of China here, could it be harmed?
I would say what should be far more important and what's more exposed in terms of Chinese interests is the shipping of oil from the Persian Gulf. This is far more exposed to the instabilities that we are facing and we are about to face than the One Belt One Road initiative. I think one of that, as part of a backlash by Iran to settle scores with the Americans for the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, we could see more insecurity in the Persian Gulf for the supply of oil. And even just threats could push up the price of oil, and if there's another attack against shipping, then we could see problems in supply. I think that is an area that's much more exposed.
Yeah, China is actually the world's largest importer of oil and gas. How concerned is China about a geopolitical crisis in the Gulf stymieing its imports? Professor Wang, as Meir Javedanfar there just mentioned that Saudi Arabia, Iran's main enemy in the region, is actually China's largest oil source in the Middle East.
Actually, China adopted very wise energy policies, where China imported oil from many countries, not only from the Middle East. Even in the Middle East, in the Gulf regions, we have many oil suppliers like Saudi Arabia, Oman, Iraq, and other countries. Actually, in recent years, China already decreased its oil import from Gulf regions. China increased oil from other areas because China already made conclusion that in the near future, the long term, this area is an unstable area. It's any conflict and the conflict could have a big negative impact on China oil. So in this case, China already make preparations for this.
So it does have a contingency plan for energy, I guess. Now, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif visited Beijing 4 times in 2019 and was in the Chinese capital as recently as New Year's Eve, that's December 31st. And China's Foreign Minister Wang back then said China will stand with Iran, quote, against unilateralism and bullying. But this statement was made before the killing of General Soleimani. I mean, does it still stand today? Professor Wang, what do you think?
I think yes. So although this statement, before the assassination, but it's still in fact, I think, because China didn't change its Iranian policy, GCPOA policy for long term. So I think it's because for China to maintain the peace and stability in the region that is China's biggest interest in this area. And GCPOA now really face the threat, so challenging. So in the future, I think China still will join other parties like Russia, Germany, Iran, UK, and France, try to persuade and convince Iran to still maintain its commitments. But I think at the moment it's very hard.
But are China's hands tied here? I mean, Professor Shi Yinghong, another professor of international relations at Renmin University in Beijing, said that China is caught up in a dilemma where it doesn't want to provoke the Trump administration, has a deepening strategic partnership with Russia, while also has its own interests at stake in Iran. Mr. Meir Javedanfar, your thoughts on what's been said here?
I think I agree with that assessment. You have to also realize, there's an old saying, you should only wish to change things that you can really change. That you think things you have control over. Some things in this region, not even Russia, which is far closer to us, has control over. When we compare to China, which is more distant. On the one hand, you've got the China-United States issue. I think the Iran-China relations come within the context of that. We cannot ignore that. China has got its own issues to settle with Mr. Trump, and any policy change from China with regards to Iran could impact that. So it's an issue of prioritization, and which is more important at times. You have to choose. Is it America, your relations with America, or with China? But also I have to say, as much as Iran has also been wronged in the Iran-U.S. conflict, where there's no doubt about it, both sides have been wronged. But you know, there are policies that Iran can change also in order to make life better for China and other countries, such as its aggressive policies towards the Saudis, such as calling for the elimination of the State of Israel, such as supporting groups that have carried out terrible crimes in different parts of this region, including in Syria and in Iraq. After the ISIS was removed, after ISIS was expelled, we saw some of these pro-Iranian proxies going out and carrying out ethnic cleansing of Sunnis in some of these areas. So also we have to, the Iranian leadership also has to make life easier for people who want to bring in stability within this region. But in the long run, again, I have to go back to the most important point, which we all agree on, which is the JCPOA. The JCPOA doesn't include Iran's support for proxies. The JCPOA is only about the nuclear issue. But, you know, just like anything else, it's part of an ecosystem. If you're, you know, you need energy, you need, oxygen for the JCPOA to survive. And what we see in this region going on right now is only sucking out the oxygen and making it more difficult for the JCPOA to survive.
And what about the short-term or the medium-term picture for China-Iran bilateral relations? I mean, an article in the Atlantic Council analyzing the relationship between the two countries in the wake of the Soleimani killing said that while the relationship between the two is strong in short, Iran needs China much, much more than China needs Iran. Mr. Javedanfar, do you agree with that kind of assessment?
Well, I would have to say yes, and this is this goes back to my previous point. Because of its policies in the region, because Iran's policies have made it very difficult for it to attract allies in the international community, to attract investment. You know, they shut down the internet for 7 days because of the demonstrations last month. That, you know, you don't find many people who would want to invest in a country that does this to its internet and is also involved in one of them in a very, very, very tense relationship with the United States. So I would say yes, that's a correct assessment. And the only way the Iranians can make it easier for themselves is to reform their policies seriously, to change them when it comes to, first and foremost, relations with regional countries, but also with the United States. You know, you can criticize United States policy without calling death to America every single day and without supporting groups that are anti-American. You know, China has got its own differences with America, but there is there's an American embassy in China, and China has an embassy in the United States. But Iran did not even allow the Americans to have a virtual embassy on the internet. They blocked it. And I think because of these issues, Iran is isolated, and it needs China far more than China needs Iran.
Right. And before I leave this segment, the Chinese embassy in Washington actually issued a warning to the Chinese diaspora living in the U.S. The statement released on Sunday said that the Chinese embassy suggests and reminds Chinese citizens in the U.S. to closely watch the security situation, stay alert, and take safety precautions, be cautious before going to public places. Professor Wang, just for our Chinese overseas looking at this, is there a real security threat for Chinese people in the U.S., or is this just a conventional statement which embassies release when global tensions are running high?
So I don't think it's in U.S. now Chinese diaspora, they feel a real threat. But I would like to say this is a conventional statement, because the embassy, the diplomatic institutions, they have the task to inform its citizens and overseas Chinese to make alert. Just like some other countries in the Middle East, they have similar attacks, and then China also issued a warning to the citizens not to make traveling to this area. So I think this is a conventional statement. But we cannot exclude something bad will happen in the United States. Now, as we know, Iran, the people and the state are very angry. We don't know anything would happen in the near future.
Right,
that's why so many people there, they make...
Can I just make one point?
Okay. Yeah, briefly.
Sorry, I would say the Chinese embassy in Baghdad needs to put a statement like that. There's a far more serious and present danger there when compared to the possible danger in Washington.
Well, yes. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Mr. Meir Danfar, a Middle East analyst, joining us live via satellite, and also Professor Wang Suolao from Peking University joining us in Beijing studio.